Welcome to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, where we talk all things good food, good business, and good cars. And now, here is your host, Arnold Garcia, founder and CEO of Petra Automotive Products. Let's roll.
All right, we are back here at the Meat Plus Ultra Business Bourbon Cigars event, and with some phenomenal business people, industry leaders, and just some remarkable stories. One of those is Errol Doebler, and his story is probably going to beat any story that we're going to have here next week. There's only one other guy that I think I would put in that other category of everybody that I've met. But Errol, thanks for being on the show.
Good to see you, Arnold. I appreciate it.
So where were you born? By the way, you got the right haircut.
Well, we look good.
Yeah,
that I can tell you, right?
And you're not as gray as me either, so you know. But you're
you're
looking good. You're looking good.
When it grows in, it gets grayer and grayer.
You do need to lose some weight.
Well, I'm working on it.
Right.
I'm working on it. But I'm a New York guy. I was born in Long Island, New York, and I appreciate you asking out of the gate because it doesn't even matter when you're from Long Island, from New York. Even though I have been back since I was 18. I always say, well, that's where I'm from because we take a lot of pride in being from Long Island.
Listen, I have known you, I guess, 2 years or 3 in this organization.
Something like that, yeah.
But I didn't know where you were from.
Yeah.
And now it makes perfect sense. Like, you're going to say the rest of the story to that. But now it makes perfect sense. I got it.
All right. Oh, yeah, the New Yorkers, we're a different breed.
All right, so you're from New York, Long Island. You grew up there, went to school there.
Yep.
Graduated from high school there.
Yep, born and raised, right? At one spot.
And then what happens after high school?
So after high school, I went to the Naval Academy.
So straight out of high school.
Well, yeah, I went to a year of the prep school, Naval Academy prep school, because they send athletes and some of the enlisted people who want to go to the Naval Academy, typically to the prep school, just to kind of reestablish your study habits, because the Naval Academy is pretty challenging academically. So they figure a lot of the athletes, like myself, just need to be reminded how to study, right? So did that. After graduation from the Naval Academy, I was assigned to a ship, USS Monongahela. It was an oiler. And then from there, I transferred to the SEAL teams. I went to SEAL Team 4 and then went right to SEAL Team 1. And I was injured on deployment. So I got medically discharged from the SEAL team, from the Navy, and then went into the private sector for a few years.
So hold on before you get to the private sector. How long were you in the Navy before you got transferred to the Navy SEAL?
So you get commissioned as an officer. So in 91, so I was in the Navy I was on that ship doing what's called surface warfare for only about 2 years. And then the remaining 6 years, I was in the SEAL teams. So 8 years, I was...
And don't you have to be like, do they select that? Like, you can't just say, hey, I want to be on the SEAL team.
Well, so it's two different things. So for an officer, it's much harder because there's fewer officers, right? You have 2 officers for every 16 enlisted sailors. So it's much harder to get an officer spot. Now, the enlisted, they'll let anybody try because there's a screening to get in. You've got to pass some things.
So anybody can say, I want to be it.
Yeah.
Then they put you to some kind of test.
Well, then you go to BUDS, which is the SEAL training, basic underwater demolition SEAL. It's 6 months, and it's got a 70% attrition rate. Seven out of 10 will just quit. And they'll usually quit in the first 5.
You gave me a story about that once where they put you underwater and you had to...
So they do lots of things to you underwater. They tie you up, and you've got to tread water tied up for, I don't know, whatever it is, 10 or 15 minutes. You've got to swim 200 yards tied up. They tie you up, and parties, what else do they do? Oh, you've got to bounce up and down in like 10 or 12 feet of water, tied up, right? So and that's actually, that doesn't sound so hard, but the treading water and the swimming, for me anyway, were easy. The bouncing up and down is hard because you have to control the air in your lungs. So if you push yourself up from the bottom of the pool and you come up and you take a huge breath in, right? Well, now you got to blow all that air out so you can sink. And if you blow it out too fast, there at the bottom, now you can't breathe. And you're it's just a big panic thing. So anyway, so they tie you up doing that. You know, then they'll put you underwater with scuba tanks and stuff like that. And, you know, they'll tie up the tanks and rip out your regulator so you can't breathe and wrap that around you. Then you've got to.
What is that? What is the purpose of that? Endurance, or that when you're in battle, something crazy can happen?
Yeah.
Or both?
So that all happens in what's called first phase of Navy SEAL training. There's 3 phases. And the first phase is literally to make you quit. And this is just one of the things. Now, tying you up and doing that stuff, it has application, because what separates the Navy SEALs from like the Green Berets and the Rangers and Delta Force is the water. We are the best in the water, in the world, hands down, right? There's no competition there. So the ability to remain calm in a very sticky situation underwater is vital. And that's just part of it, right? So we're going to tie you up and you're going to have to swim and tread water, because God forbid, what happens if you got captured and they tie you up and threw you over, right? Well, you're going to survive. So it's how you handle the pressure, right? How you adapt to certain circumstances, how fast you can learn. Some people surprisingly aren't very good swimmers.
Mental game too, right?
All mental. I could teach anybody. I could teach you how to tie you up and how to swim. The technique
that's going to be on episode 2.
That's be episode 2, right?
Go to a swimming pool.
That's right.
And I was going to tie me up and teach me how to do this.
That's right. But what gets people is the mental aspect of it. They freak out. Oh my God, that's impossible. What happens if? And now they let their emotions get the better of them, and they're not thinking clearly, and they panic. And that's what they want you to do. And then you panic enough, then you quit, right? Because they're not going to let you drown, but they'll let you think that they're going to let you drown. Yeah. That's right.
And there's seconds probably you're like, I'm going to drown.
That's right. So
did you get through all 3 phases?
You have to.
You were a Navy SEAL.
Yeah. Well, once you graduate BUD/S training, then you get assigned to your SEAL team. Okay. Now, the thing about that is, you think when you graduate 6 months of Navy SEAL training, like you're on top of the world. Like I'm the man. Then you get to your SEAL team and you realize everybody here went through BUD/S. I am no, and they tell you like
you are no exception.
You are like, you're not shit. We all did that, right? You start over. And so now you've got.
But are you a Navy SEAL at that point?
Yeah.
Even though you're the new kid in that team.
Yeah. So now they don't give you your trident, which is the nice, beautiful eagle, and with the anchor. You've got to earn that. You've got to you're on a probation period. You've got to pass tests, but you're on a platoon, and so you're a Navy SEAL, but you're not really a SEAL until you get your trident.
Did you get it before you got injured?
Oh yeah. You get that. That's the first thing you're trying to do when you get out of BUD/S.
So you got it.
Oh yeah.
You got that.
Oh yeah.
You are a real Navy
That's
SEAL.
it. I am a real Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like me.
Just like you. The Cuban Navy SEAL.
Yeah. So you did that for 6 years?
Yeah.
Navy SEALs for 6 years?
Yeah.
You told me a story once, and I don't want to interrupt your story, but the uniform story. Tell me the uniform story again. You remember that?
Oh God. Okay. Yeah. When I went out and I thought we were just being regular uniform, we had to be in the inspection uniform. Yeah. So so you have to stand duty. You have to stand watch in the Navy, in the military, right? You got duty weekend. That means somebody's got to be around, and there's a group of you. And so the first time I was at SEAL training, when I was on a ship, standing duty was it was great, because there wasn't any really work to do. You're on the ship for the weekend. You got to catch up on some sleep, right? The whole thing. And I just thought it was going to be that. So it was a Saturday and Sunday. And I had, the uniform I wore during SEAL training every day, which was just a beat up, greens and hat. And I walked out and all the other guys were in their inspection uniform, just looking sharp. And I looked at one of the guys. I go, "What are you doing?" And he looks at me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I didn't know. I had no idea that that's what it, so the instructor came and he looked at me, and I was the officer, so I was in charge. I was out in front of everybody. And he goes, I'm going to give you a chance to explain yourself before I hammer the hell out of you.
Those sounds like fearful words.
They were fearful. And I just literally, I go, I had no idea. I didn't know that this, I know I should have known, but I didn't. He goes, okay. He goes, go back and get your inspection uniform. Be back here in 5 minutes. And I said, I can't. My inspection uniform is at the dry cleaner. I'm getting it dry cleaned. And it's closed today. Like, you can't pick it up on Saturday or Sunday. And so the rest of the story goes, right? When you get in trouble at SEAL training, they tell you to go to the ocean, jump in, get wet, and then roll around and get all the sand on you. So we, go get wet. I came back and he goes, you've got 20 minutes to get into an inspection uniform. I said, I just told you I don't have one. He goes, you've got 19 minutes and 30 seconds. So the rest of the day, now this was it.
So now you got yelled at, you're wet,
Yeah.
full of sand,
Full of sand.
and the clock is ticking and you need a uniform.
I need to get into an inspection uniform. So this is at like 5:30 in the morning. By 7 o'clock that night, I was finally able to piece together a uniform. But that was literally 12 hours of me coming down, not being in a full uniform, go get wet and sandy again. So then I got to get everything off. And by that,
So repeating.
just repeating over and over. It wasn't like you have all day to go find a uniform. He'd give me 20 minutes. I'd come back in the same uniform. He'd like, go get wet and sandy. And he goes, now you give me an hour.
kidding?
It was, so what was happening was, so this was on a weekend. So guys started, because you have the weekends off unless you're on duty at SEAL training. And so guys started to wake up and they'd be like, what's going on? And I would tell them like, So, some guy would throw me a hat, right? Okay, here, take my hat. And then somebody would say, hey, look, take this uniform, give me yours. I'll starch it and iron it, right? So everybody kind of started to chip in, but it took all day. Your boots have to be shined, right? Like, so by the end of the night, it was miserable. It was, but that's the standard.
Listen, I'm sitting here, I'm just thinking about what suffering.
12 hours. I didn't eat. Like, I couldn't go to lunch. He's like, okay, you can go to lunch, but you got to be back here in 20 minutes.
And then when you failed, you're going to go win again.
You got to go. And so it wasn't fun, but telling the story is kind of fun. And it is a story of guys, they did everything they could to help, but it's just, you're limited, right?
Yeah.
Hey man, you can't have my inspection. Well, first of all, because it's got my name on it.
Yeah.
Right. So the stuff had your name. So it had to be my stuff. Right. And yeah, so they'd be like, well, do you have another one? We'll iron it for you. I'm like, that one's got a hole in it. It was awful.
Man.
But look, it was the standard. And that's what makes the SEAL teams, that's what makes that training very unique. Because what he said wasn't, he was right. He goes, yeah, I believe that you didn't know. He goes, but it's your job to know. So therefore, that is not an
And somebody
excuse.
could. You're the elite of the elite, right? And
Yeah.
So he was probably saying you got to know your stuff.
You got to know what the expectation is, and you're an officer. You're in charge. Even worse. So he was like, this is not going to end.
Yeah.
We have today and tomorrow.
And you've never forgotten it. We're still talking about
We're still talking about it because it was truly a lesson on.
Did you ever
standards.
see any action?
We did, and I saw, ironically, so I got injured on deployment in a rehearsal for a real world operation that was going to take the next day, and that's a whole nother story. Then when I joined the FBI years later, during my time there,
So hold on, walk me. So you get hurt.
Yeah.
You leave the military. Do you go straight to FBI?
no, I spent about 4 years in the 3 or 4 years in the private sector.
Doing what?
I did sales management. I sold copiers.
Okay.
The Vietnam of sales. You could sell a copier, you could sell anything. But and then I sold software too. Like this is like 2000, when software just started.
I mean, did you walk in and tell people, look, I want to sell you a copier. I'm an ex-Navy SEAL. Do you want to buy it? 'Cause I think most people would have said, okay.
It did help a little bit. It did help a little bit because, some people just were like, well, that's a cool story. I want to come in and meet you. So I would get meetings for that reason, but I still had to, they weren't going to buy it just because I was a Navy SEAL.
Those copies were expensive.
They were very expensive.
It wasn't a cheap purchase,
That's right, for sure. So anyway, 9/11 happens. And like everybody else, I was like, all right, I got to get back into this game. I called the SEAL teams. And they're like, oh, we'll take you back, but you're not going to get a platoon. You're not going to go to combat for a lot of reasons, but we'll take you back. And so I said, all right, well, so I applied for the FBI and the CIA. And all I did was I said, the first one that gets back to me is where I'm going. So the FBI was the first one to get back to me. And in 2010, the war was really ramping up. And
So when did you start with the FBI?
Mhm.
What year?
So I started the FBI in 2003.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what was happening in the war was our special operations forces, like the SEALs, Delta, the Rangers, were doing a great job of smashing targets, right? And getting the bad guys. What they weren't doing a good job at was collecting intelligence. So what they did was they needed somebody with them who could fight, but also interview people on target, right? Because let's get some intelligence. So who's really good at establishing rapport with an adversary and getting actionable information quickly? Well, a good FBI agent's good at that, right? We talk to bad guys all the time just trying to get information. So they attached guys like me to the Rangers, to the SEALs. So when they were all, killer capture operations for tier 1 terrorist targets. So it was really going after the worst of the worst.
So you're an official FBI agent doing this role.
That's right. So I was attached to the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I was with them for about 4 months in Afghanistan. We averaged an operation, I think it was close to every other day, right? And so we saw a lot of combat. And so ironically, that's where I saw all my combat. It wasn't as a Navy SEAL, but I got into that position.
FBI agent with the Navy SEAL.
Right. So because and I worked counterterrorism.
So you're kind of doing interrogation, right?
Yeah. So we would go on a target, right? And we'd secure the target. And then they would hand it over to me and be like, Errol, find the bad guy. Now, lots of times it was easy, right? We had his picture and there you are. Oh, Arnold, you're the bad guy. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the time the bad guy we're looking for wasn't there. So I had to talk to people. I had to get somebody to give me some information where we can find them. And then any other information I could get. And sometimes they would say, Errol, you got 10 minutes because we got to get out of here. And sometimes it was like, you had an hour.
You had translators?
Yep. Everything went through a translator. The only time that we came across an English speaker, turned out that guy was involved in a plot against a target in New Jersey. So that was pretty cool that we were able to kind of get the information on that. Because what we would do, we would get the information and it would go into the intelligence channels. But when there was something like that, I was able to just call the FBI directly and be like, hey, here's all the information we got.
What was your problem?
Yep. And now I'll give it to you and then anything else you need. Now, that guy's being held over here. So that was cool.
So how long were you the FBI again?
13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
And how long in the military?
8.
Yeah. So really service to the country, 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, I really do. And as I sort of say, I know people say this sometimes. I'm from Cuba.
Yeah.
I sincerely thank you for protecting America and defending America.
Yeah, no, I used to get very uncomfortable when people would say that to me. And I just started saying, just say you're welcome, right? Because they're saying thank you, just say you're welcome. But what's interesting is, I spent 21 years serving this country in pretty high-risk roles. But because I didn't do 20 straight years with one organization, I get no retirement. I get, it's kind of bullshit.
Oh, you're so close.
But that's okay. That's okay.
So you leave the FBI and you start doing what?
So I left the FBI for, I got frustrated with some of the leadership in the FBI. And it looks like these days they're going to turn that around. I don't know.
You might have been right.
Well, I was right? Because what I was experiencing on a micro level started to come out in a more macro level over the last several years. I'm rooting for the FBI. And I think it looks like they're starting to get back to their
I
mission.
think America's root for the FBI.
Yeah. Well, we should.
all want
Yeah.
a phenomenal FBI
We got
that
to.
protects us, that is honest, that's real.
Yeah.
We need the protection of people like that. That is honest and real.
Yeah. And it did appear as though they got caught up in some political shenanigans. Be that as it may. So that's why I left, right? Because you can't, for me, it was, look, my gripes are legitimate, but I can't do anything about them. So I either just accept what it is and do my job and stop bitching and moaning, or leave, And so I said, I'm going to leave, but I think I have something to offer people with my leadership experience. So I started Ice Cold Leader. It's a leadership consulting firm. And I just what I did was develop a process for solving problems. That's it. Because I just went through all the dangerous situations I was in the SEAL teams, in the FBI, which were a lot, in combat. And I broke down how I was able to stay calm, under stress, make good decisions quickly. It's just a process that your brain goes through. And it's what we use to solve
Analyze problem.
It's first
And quickly come up with a
a solution, right? So it really all starts with the emotion. How am I feeling? You got to recognize that. Well, I'm petrified. Okay, good. You've just acknowledged it. Now, how do you normally act when you're petrified? You've got to be aware of that. Some people might say, when I'm petrified, I roll into myself. Okay, if you know that, then if you're in a life or death situation, doing this isn't going to work. That's not the right behavior. So you've got to now recognize that and go, I know my instinct is to curl up in a ball. I have to pick another behavior. And that's it. What do I pick? I pick courage. I pick calmness. And then you have to act that, and then you have to make a plan, right?
And you're talking about quick steps.
You can do this so look, I learned this process and I was doing it for a long time. And what we talk about here, the planning process, SMAC, that's the end of it, right? Go, okay, now that I've got my personal stuff together.
Which SMAC is your creation, right?
Well, no, it's what we used in the SEAL teams to plan.
And tell people what SMAC is.
SMAC is just a planning process that stands for the situation, the mission, the actions, the contingency, the command, and the communication. All I did was bring that to Ice Cold Leader in a modified version to say, you can cover the elements of this in 10 seconds and help get you through any situation.
Businessmen get through something.
Business people get through the situation, right? Now, just on its own, it's still a good tool. But when you combine, right, you go into your boardroom meeting, right? And you're furious. And you need to make a plan to fix the situation. If you just go with the plan, but you're acting on your anger, you're going to make a good plan to do something terrible. Right?
Sounds right.
Right? How many times have you just been so mad you said, here's what we're doing? Ah! Well,
Emotion.
yeah. So you follow the elements and that plan is going to succeed, except it's a plan to do harm. You need the first parts of this process. Anybody needs to say, how am I feeling? How am I planning on acting on that feeling? Is that the right action? If not, what is the right action? Because that's the one I need to focus on. Now I can make my plan, right? If you make a plan out of fear, if you make a plan out of anger, you're going to have your plan is going to be for bad.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think and that's in life general.
Life in general. And that's why it's so powerful working with organizations. I don't tell.
But I can't tell you how many times I've fired Butch.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Out of
right?
anger,
Out of
and
anger.
frustration.
Right? Then you had to come back. That's right. But that's why it's so powerful for organizations, Arnold, because what I do is I don't say, hey, great leaders do these 4 things. And they'll probably be accurate. But the question you have to ask is, well, what happens if I already do those 4 things and I'm still struggling? What my process allows is for people to find where their gap is themselves, through the process. My gap is I act on my emotions without thinking. If I fix that, everything to the right is going to fall into place. Now, yours just might be, I don't plan. I just wing it. But everything up to that is good. Well, I said, well, Arnold, then your gap is you need to settle down. You need to start planning. You need to set some time. That's your gap. So everybody will find where their gap is in this process and where to fix it.
Now that you know it.
Now that you know it, you've got to be aware of
things
it.
to fix it.
You got to be aware.
I mean, it's almost, it's great. And I've gone through your program now, I guess 2 years or so with the program and still using it today. But really, if you think about it, in most, like if you're an alcoholic, right? What's step one? I'm an alcoholic.
That's right. Admitting what it is. I've never used that analogy.
So it always typically, I think in life, business, personal, whatever, because we all have weaknesses and strength. It all starts with saying, yeah, I'm not that good at that. Or I'm really pissed off.
Yes.
And I'm afraid that I'm going to make a decision out of this being pissed off.
Yep.
Or I'm scared to lose something.
That's right.
And so now I'm making this decision not on winning, but on the fear of losing.
You're acting on that fear without addressing the fact that that action isn't going to be the right action. And the other thing that what happens, Arnold, is you get to understand and trust certain emotions. You get to know. So what I know is if there is chaos, I can trust my emotion around chaos to act because I've done it so many times, I don't have to think about it. If an active shooter happened in here, I would absolutely trust my instinct on what to do because I'm aware of it. There's fear, but I can trust that fear to do the right thing. Anger is a different issue altogether for me. If I'm angry, what I know is if I act intuitively on my anger, I'll do something destructive. I will call you a name. I'll insult you. Whatever it will be, it won't be positive. So when I get angry, I literally still have to go through my process. Like, okay, I'm really mad. Instinctively, I want to do this. That is not the right behavior. Pick a new one. And then now what's my plan to get through it? So you start to really learn about yourself, what to trust, what not to trust, where you need to focus your time and attention. It's for everybody.
Yeah.
I have to market it as something, right? I go to you, come on, let's do business, right? The leadership thing. 10 times out of 10, when I'm working with somebody, we start dealing with personal issues.
100%.
Hey,
well, it all starts there.
Yep.
It all starts there,
Yep.
right? So how long have you been doing this?
So we opened the doors in 2016. So, we're in our 9th year.
And it's called Ice Cold
Leader.
Ice Cold Leadership. Businesses, personal.
Well, we primarily go through businesses, right? And so we'll go, we went through your business, right? You and your leadership would go through it, and then you'd be like, this is awesome. And then let's get some more people
And
through
you start bringing it down.
And we start bringing it down. But again, in those sessions, the personal always comes up for the people, right?
It does.
Errol, will this work at home? Like, well, yeah, work at home. Let's talk about it, right? Because what I want to show everybody is it's just a problem to be solved. If I can show you a process to solve every problem, then all of a sudden, you're not so worried about problems anymore, right? You're like, oh, yeah,
You just got to follow the process.
just follow the process, right? You have a process in your business for everything. And what I try to tell people is, well, what's your leadership process, right? And that throws people like, well, what do you mean? Exactly, right? Would you not ever, if I said, what's your process for invoicing? You'd be like,
Yeah.
You wouldn't say, what do I mean?
Yeah,
Right?
you got it down.
Yeah, you know it. So,
Yeah, I did the process for leadership. Probably throws a wrench on a lot of people. It's like,
because you're not thinking about it. Yet we all know how important it is.
so we all know how process is, right?
Yeah.
But we have process for what you're talking about.
Yep.
We have a process for shipping.
Yep.
We have a process for receiving, process for invoice, etc. Blah, 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 blah.
Process for hiring, process for firing.
What was your first car?
My first car was a 1969 Cadillac.
Nice.
My dad.
to go full.
Well, so it's funny you asked that. We used to call it Hank's Tank because it was the biggest Cadillac model ever made. Either 68 or 69 was, and it was huge. And my dad got it for $900 after I got my license. He's like, here's the car.
It's a great story.
It was my first
in
car.
the Errol Museum, what is the car that you want in the Errol Museum?
I So I'm a truck guy. I like trucks. I like my pickup, but what I want is a Shelby, a Ford Shelby, an old
Doebler show, yeah.
yeah, an old school
That's a
muscle
nice
car.
You would fit that profile.
It's
profile.
now
All right, of all the places you've traveled, what's the one you like the most?
and I've traveled the better part of the world. I have such a strong affinity for the South and Central American culture. I love it. I loved being in Honduras, the poorest nation in the world. I was there for, I don't know, 3 weeks, whatever it was. And dirt roads, shacks, the whole, right? You know the deal. And those people were so nice and so much fun. It always just seemed to be about be nice and have some fun, right? Into Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Panama. I just fell in love with that culture.
That's good.
That is my favorite.
Is there a bucket list place you want to go to that you haven't been to?
No, there's not. But what I do know is I need to see, I've been to most of the United States, but I'd like to hit all 50 states.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I haven't done that. But as far as the world goes, there's places that I'd like to go back to, but there's nothing that really stands out right now that I have to get to. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Errol, this has been great.
I hope
We're going to
we
bring
had
you.
some
No,
value.
we're going to bring you back on.
I'm good.
We're going to elaborate. I loved it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, your main source for all things good and fun, business, food, and cars. If you like this episode, make sure to rate us and subscribe. If you would like to be a guest on our show, please leave a message at the link below. Till next time, happy eating.